Yeah.
that has to do that.
Yeah, that's such an important question. Did everybody hear the question? Okay. It's all right, repeat it. How do we, if people aren't asking the questions that the gospel answers, if it's not even on the radar, completely different map, then how do we begin? I think one way through this here is to realize that because we are who God says we are, He created us. That hasn't changed. We are wired the way God wired us, and we're broken in the same way we've always been broken. In a fallen human nature that expresses that in different ways, but we're all fallen. We're all broken. And that together He is speaking a new world into existence based on what He has diagnosed the problem to be. So that we have confidence now to know that God is actually the one preaching the gospel. He's the one raising the dead. Ezekiel may prophesy to the bones, but it's actually God who's raising the dead through His speech. We have to have that kind of confidence that God is still raising the dead by a strange alien gospel that makes no sense to people when they first hear it, and yet crawls inside them, and through that gospel, the Holy Spirit regenerates them, and they become new creatures. So we have to have the confidence of that. But at the same time, I also think there's pre-evangelism. What Francis Schaeffer called pre-evangelism, where you also have to prepare the ground for people at least to listen to it. Not necessarily embrace it, but to at least listen to it. And I think that that's where we're going to have to get a little creative. Not in the preaching of the gospel, preaching of the problem and the solution, but in the sort of the questions around it. So, for example, questions that I'm asked by young people today, what should we think about karma? Now, didn't you all grow up asking your parents, what do you think about karma? Of course you did. No, I didn't either, and I live in California. Sort of where karma was invented. No, but that's what people are asking. So I stopped for a moment, and the first thing I wanted to say was, of course not, you silly person. Who would believe in such a ridiculous doctrine as karma? But then it hit me, actually, of course I believe in karma. My betters here might correct me on this, but I think it might have something to do with what Paul's talking about when he speaks of the stoicheia tou kosmou, the elementary powers. That whether it's natural law or whether it's entrusting your destiny to the stars, as pagans do, or to Torah as the last word over your life. You are basically led by fate rather than by grace. Reliance on that surprising announcement that God gives you that in spite of the fact you should have all kinds of garbage coming back to you because of what you've dished out to the universe while we were enemies. He's reconciled us to Himself by the death of His Son. That's maybe the gospel against that backdrop even makes more sense to a generation that really is wondering about karma. Isn't it interesting that so many people are saying, if you look at the statistics, it's one of the things that I didn't have time to bring out here, but as more and more people don't believe in the Trinity, or even know what it is, even heard of it, more and more younger people are believing in karma. Well, I actually think that can be an opportunity for us to start there, not necessarily start at the Trinity, we get there, but start with the idea, what hope do you have if karma has the last word in this story for you? Yes, there's karma. That's why there's hell. But there's someone who took my bad karma on himself on the cross. And I don't think that's syncretistic. I think that that's dynamic equivalent for a new culture, maybe. It's those sort of things that, missionaries can teach us about because we're going to have to think like missionaries in this new culture. Dynamic equivalence. How can we communicate the same message, but in terms that sort of cause people? And let me just, one more thing there. With one person in particular who had the conversation about reincarnation recently. And said, well, we could sit around and talk about whether certain ideas people come up with in the middle of the night are good or bad, whether they've had too much ice cream before they went to sleep or whatever, they need more sleep, period, before they have ideas. But at the end of the day, the question is what is real? What really has happened? And we know that Jesus rose from the dead. So if Jesus rose from the dead, he gets to tell us whether there's reincarnation. And he says, no, there's resurrection. It's better than that. And so his follow-up was, but how can I know that that's true? It gave them arguments for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. He's heard this over and over and over again. That time the penny dropped. Exactly the same words I've said to this young man over and over and over so many times, walked away as water over a duck's back. At this time, I could see it in his face. And he said, wow, this is true. I think we just have to hang in there and just, they have nowhere, they're in a sea of jello. And for us to give them a place to stand is, I think, going to be, remember, people are still created in the image of God, no matter how goofy the ideas that they've entertained are. They're still God's image bearers. They're still reasonable creatures, no matter how much they've suppressed the truth and unrighteousness. They can't suppress everything at the same time.